we should have definitely some kind of a knowledge from experts. So we have a small 15-20 minutes program of five-side chat. Now five-side chat appudu stage meeda experts vachi vaallu maatladtaru vaalla experiences. Now I call upon Murali Chirala garu. Murali Chirala garu, the CEO of Falconex, is going to moderate today's five chat program.
Can I get the attention of everybody so that we respect the panelists? Before I call the panelists, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Telugu Times, its partner TV9, the Consul General, and many other promoters who have actually made this possible here at Falconex. And delighted that Falconex could be a co-host of the very first Business Excellence Awards. Hope that it will continue into the future for many, many more decades as well. So the first panelist that I'd like to invite on stage is Srikanth Satya. Srikanth is the CTO and Chief Development Officer of Wheels Up. Most of you successful members out here would probably know about Wheels Up. You probably chartered their flights, and we'll have Srikanth talk about what's the technology involved in that. Srikanth. Next, I'd like to invite Shravan Goli, the Chief Operating Officer at Coursera and the former president of Dice.com. Coursera, I think, completely transformed the way we learn things, and with the pandemic, probably became a verb just like Google. So, welcome. And I have three names. Is that it, JP? For the panel? Yeah. So last but not the least, Raja Koduri. Raja, until recently, was an executive vice president at Intel. And anecdotally, I just found out that he's also the cousin of the Bahubali's director, S.S. Rajamouli. So he's obviously already got a larger-than-life introduction here. Some of the technologies that he has... Raja, please come on. So as you can see, we've got a diverse group of panelists here. So what I'll do is, as something that we haven't agreed on, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. Again, we'll time it so that we'll take about 60 seconds to 90 seconds each. And based on which, I think we'll be able to figure out what we can to talk about with the audience out here today. So why don't we start with you, Raja?
Is this on? On? Yeah. నా పేరు రాజా కుదురి అండి. I've been here 30 years. I was born and grew up in Kovur, Rajahmundry Pakkana, where he was born. I went to school in Rajahmundry, so every day crossing Godavari. And I've been involved in many things. We'll talk some more about that, but so that's who I am.
I'm Shravan Goli, Chief Operating Officer at Coursera. I've been here for more than 30 years. Grew up in Hyderabad, and it's been a pleasure to kind of watch the awards as well, and all of the people who have come here. So thanks to TV9, but really great to hear from you, Oscar, and all of the dignitaries as well, Dr. Prasad. So really appreciate the opportunity, and so happy to be here.
Yeah, my name is Srikanth Satya. Currently I'm working as CTO at Wheels Up. Before that, I was one of the original leaders in Amazon AWS when it started. I used to live in Bay Area, have several friends here, but I moved to Seattle to work for AWS. And of course, as I said, the rest is history. That's what AWS has done to the industry. Today specifically, I want to talk about not only the technology that we are working on, but also what is Indianism and how the Indian values can help in entrepreneurship in America, and how is America helping us to grow into that. Right? That's what I wanted to talk about today.
Well, why don't we take that cue and have you actually initiate that conversation so each of us can pick up that and then take that a little forward. So it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you.
మీరు తెలుగులో మాట్లాడినా ఇంగ్లీష్లో మాట్లాడినా the audience is ready.
I think we have some-
But we have some special guests, so it'll be nice to
Yeah.
keep that in English.
Sure, I'll speak in English because some of our mayor from Sunnyvale can't understand if I speak in Telugu. The thing is, when we talk about entrepreneurship and basically the Indian culture, a lot of people talk about, how Indians have to change. I think Shankar, he talked about that. And also a lot of people talk about Bhagavad Gita, what is told in Bhagavad Gita, there's so many words that said. And lot of stories that we have heard as kids and grew up. People keep talking about these things, but these things are true for everyone, not just for entrepreneurs. It is for basically how to be a good human being. There is nothing special in the entrepreneurship part of it. But what I want to specifically focus today on few things. We have come here, the first day I lived in the US was on Dixon Landing Road, not very far from here in Milpitas. So this is my first city. And back then, I used to play for cricket in Sunnyvale. In Sunnyvale Cricket Club, we didn't have a ground, and we had talked then mayor who helped us get the ground in Ortega Park. So I played for a long time in Ortega Park. And then the final job I did was in Santa Clara. So the mayor of Santa Clara at Sun Microsystems before I decided to move to Seattle. The thing is, a country from which we have come, the country to which we have come, how it has helped us, the inclusiveness. At least I came with $0 in my pocket here, but with education. But the inclusiveness and how these cities here helped me to grow and helped me understand how we can include people and the company, the country, everyone and the community can grow along with it. Now, the Indian thing that I want to talk about, for example, there are a lot of stories from India which speak about entrepreneurship that we are never taught. In fact, our generation probably was the worst generation because we absolutely learned nothing about Indian culture because the colonial mindset has taken us over so much that we were never taught about those things. In fact, I used to study in school in Hyderabad where if we spoke in Telugu, we used to get fined. There was a 25 paisa fine for every time we speak in Telugu in the
We were
school.
in the same school.
So we were caught in that culture. But look at our culture, right? I'll quote one example of Alasani Peddana, who was in Vijayanagar Empire, one of the 9 or the Astadikajas. So once Sri Krishna Devaraya asked him to do an Asukavitra, means extempore, write this poem right now. So we also have certain bosses like that we have to deal with them. All of you might have had the experience. Then he first said, Niradi Stalambu, Ramani Priyutika Ichu, Techi Ichu Kapura Vidambu. Like that he first sold that poem. The poem meaning is clearly that to write a poem, I need certain things. I need a nice place. I need a nice beautiful woman serving me something, good food. I need a beautiful cart on which I can sit and write it, and all that. So while he was doing it, in the background, he's developing the story that he has to do. And then after that, he did 100 poems, extempore, right? So the thinking is that how can we give these examples to people to deal with their current problem? We never been taught about any of these things. Our history is replete with only Mughal Raj and British Raj and all these things, but we never learned about certain things like this. But that's where we really need to seek the inspiration to develop ourselves. In fact, I actually started an organization called Mana Samskruti in Seattle area to teach and develop these kind of experienced leadership. They are brought up with Western culture, but when you give the Indianism to it, we can create really new things and create big entrepreneurs from that. One example was I was teaching students in the class, like someone told, Telugu is Italy of the East. Then one student raised his hand. He was just 8-year-old kid. He said, which language is older, Telugu or Italy? I said Telugu. Then he said, why is Italy not called Telugu of the West? Why are you taking the other way? He asked me this question. I was dumbfounded for a second. I mean, of course, both languages share this, that every word ends with a vowel. That's why they get that. So that mindset, that way you make people think, the confidence that they get. But this, our ancestors have done some really, really innovative things. Like the Advaita philosophy that Shankaracharya has pronounced, it's still very hard to poke at it and say that there's something wrong with that philosophy. That kind of abstract thinking, that kind of values given to real knowledge, because even before a king, the minister is more powerful because he is the person of knowledge. That's how the Indian tradition are. How much importance we give to knowledge. So all these things, if you bring to the culture of people here, we can learn and develop newer things. And that's my philosophy of entrepreneurship in the US.
Well, Shravan, you want to one-up that.
I was just thinking, except for that 25 cents fine, I don't think I can beat that. But I think that's amazing to hear. I'll take a different tactic. I think you said you should share what's on top of your mind. I'm actually thinking, what is there for the food in the first place? And then the second thing was a movie that I watched this afternoon, Indian Ramayana. Actually, I encourage everyone to watch that movie. No big name actors. Very refreshing comedy. You can actually relate to it. Great acting. Ordinary actors. You wouldn't watch that if you just see a poster. So that's the kind of thing, right? Entrepreneurship, it's not somewhere there on a poster. It's exciting. It's an awesome journey. No, it's like the right people at the right time coming together and building great companies. So I'll take a different tactic here a little bit. When I think about what's on top of my mind, at this point, I think about Coursera. The basic philosophy is there's talent is equally distributed anywhere, everywhere in the world. Unfortunately, opportunity is not. So education is the way that you create and connect people with opportunity. So when I think about education, there are 400 million jobs we're expected to be automated in the next 10 years. 1 billion people are expected to enter the workforce over the course of the next 10 years. There aren't enough physical institutions in the world that can teach these populations. The other thing that's happening in India-specific terms, there are 183 million people are going to be between the age of 15 to 64 in the next 20 years. And this will supply about 22% of the world's workforce. 22%. 1/5 of the workforce will be in India. That's fascinating. But access to education, the gross enrollment ratio, which is called, basically access to college level education for those who are graduating, it's about 22%. Which means only 1 in 5 people who are graduating high school have access to any level of college education in India. Now, talk about AI. You talk about change, a lot of change. I think a lot of this is, the change is hitting us so fast. 6 months ago, nobody was talking about LLMs and GPT, nothing. All of a sudden, everyone's jobs are gone. In fact, University of Pennsylvania published a study just about 3 months ago. They said 49% of every individual's job, half of their tasks would be done by AI. So that's all the people who are here, by the way. We were always thinking about low-skilled workers, but no, this is also high-skilled workers. So this is not doomsday scenario though, right, ultimately. But what this means is, at the end of the day, individuals have to continuously reskill. And I think when I look around this room and kind of what brought a lot of success to the Indian ecosystem and entrepreneurs, we are learners at heart. We build on agility. We build on resilience. We build on leadership. We build on flexibility. Guess what AI cannot automate? Exactly these are the skills. You talk about generalists, but these are the human skills. So I was at World Economic Forum Growth Summit in Geneva just about 2 months ago. We published a report, Coursera and World Economic Report. 61% of all workers will have to reskill between now and 2027. 61%. And what they said, and then they also looked at employers. Employers said, we want people to have human skills. We're prioritizing human skills. Because everything else, a lot of technology can help you to do. But where do you learn human skills? And I could share a lot of the experience you've gone through, but growing up in India, at least, damn, these phones were not there, I'm glad. When we were growing up, the forcing function was to get on the streets, grab a bunch of people, play gully cricket, right? The standard stuff. That's how we grew up. But I reflect upon that. Like, I used to also do street dramas, festivals, Ganesh. Those were the soft skills that I never thought would be really helpful and valuable for me later in life. And so the opportunity for the kids growing up today and the soft skills it's a problem. It's a real problem. They're living in this device world. So first is, top of my mind, how do we get these massive populations educated? But also, how do we develop these future generations to have the human skills that are going to prepare them for the jobs?
Excellent. So Raja.
Yeah, I'll go to what's on top of mind, and that changed 1,000 times, particularly after this talk. It's really interesting. A friend of mine recently said that if our brains can talk to each other, we wouldn't need a language. Right? Imagine that. We invented language to communicate our thoughts. And if our brains could talk to each other, we probably wouldn't all be here, because there won't be a Telugu community, right? There'll only be one, human community, right? That whatever is that language. And then we invented this language, and now there is a finite set of data we created in this language, through writings, through communication, and we scraped that entire thing, and we created these large language models, and now we say, oh my God, AI has taken over the world, because it's the language we then created, it's the stuff that we put out there, it's just, our context length is, that if I read 180 characters, and if you ask me a question about it, I'll answer. And somebody smarter than me can read a whole page and can answer a question. Somebody even super smarter can read an entire book, and you can ask, answer a bunch of questions, and they will answer. But the AI can read like 1,000 books and answer. Yeah, damn. If you define intelligence as holding a large context, it is smarter than us. Okay, just acknowledge it, because we define what smartness is, right? The AI didn't define what smartness is. We define by our own definition. Yeah, it is. We created a thing which people are scared of. We call it monster. We call it the thing. If there are any Game of Thrones fans here, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I call this thing as a dragon. Okay, so. Would you rather want to be flying a dragon, or you want to be kind of burned by the dragon? So I think don't be afraid of it, but I think everybody needs to learn how to fly this dragon. And in terms of employment and other stuff, right? And connecting back to the things he was saying. I grew up. In a place where actually we didn't go to school. None of us went to school, me and my cousin, until we were, I think I was 7, but the first time I went to school. But we were surrounded at home by a lot of books. So by age 7, and there were no comics, there was nothing, right? So there were these big, thick books, Telugu books, of entire Mahabharata and Ramayana in Telugu Vachan. And so I finished reading all the stuff by the time I was 7. Okay. I didn't understand most of the stuff, but I used to skip through all the interesting parts, the action sequences of A is fighting B and all, and then there is in between some of these guys talk and stuff, skip, and all that stuff. But the stories, there's so much amazing, stuff there. Okay, in the entire Mahabharata, Bhagavata and Ramayana, right? Amazing amount of knowledge encoded. And some of it became superstitions and all, but there is a tons of knowledge encoded. But how do you tell those stories? Nobody actually even touched, scraped, point not 1% of that in any medium that the kids today understand, right? So where is the Game of Thrones level, it will just be one chapter of Mahabharata will be 9 seasons, right? There is not such work done. And the ability to do that, I believe actually, right? So, and this is on top of my mind because this is what I've been working on since I got out of the mega corporations of Silicon Valley. Is there are at least over 1 million spectacular artists in India, and they make less than 100 rupees a day. Okay. If you go to any of the temples, you see spectacular artwork drawn. I was in Simhatala recently, and I asked the guy who was doing this stuff how much he makes. He said 200 rupees, basically. That's it. So AI tech, right? That a person like that, he's not computer literate, okay? But AI bridges the gap. Now I can make him draw a sketch. He can guide the AI to draw spectacular figures, right? AI without human is some randomly interesting stuff, not really precisely interesting stories at all. So, one of my goals with the startup I'm working on is how do I employ literally hundreds of thousands of artists. While here everybody's talking about AI will get all artists unemployed. I believe AI will make every artist employed. Right? Just as one example of one vertical I'm talking about here, and storytelling creation. So anyway, a lot. I said a lot, but
No, actually, in following the three of you, I think I can thread an interesting after question here. But since the conversation moved towards AI, I just wanted to give a quick anecdotal story. FalconX had its technology day about 2-3 weeks ago. And the Honorable CG actually had some closing remarks. And the last remark was about AI. And he is a civil servant, and the civil services exam, as you know, is a very difficult thing. And ChatGPT is aced every one of the medical and bar things. He said, according to the May 19th announcement that the CG made, ChatGPT still failed the UPSC exam. So it still needs a lot more work to be done. But having said that, you, Shravan, talked about the size of the workforce in India, around the world. And then we're talking about AI displacing 49% of each individual's high-end work as well. Are we going to be looking at, and I want each of you to think about this and discuss this, are we looking at a Y2K moment here, where AI is going to be doing a lot of things, biases are incorporated, and suddenly the world is saying let's kind of scale things back. Where do you see, what kind of skills are needed to start to become that workforce that can start to help mankind recover from this AI infusion that seemed to have, we've lost control over it. So, Srikant Garu, why don't you help us here?
Well, that's all this whole conference is about, entrepreneurship. The jobs we know now might disappear, but there could be new jobs coming. That's the whole idea about it. But how do we go about finding those new jobs? How do we think about them? I mean, this is where we as Indians living in a country like US can have spectacularly different viewpoint. I was taking my son to college, like every parent goes. I went to MIT, and the professor there told me, right, I don't want just your kid has 2400 on SAT and then he has 4.0 GPA. That itself won't cut. We would also see what is it that you are going to teach us in the course. Of course, we're going to teach a lot to your kid, but what is your kid teaching us? And then my answer to him was the same thing that I was talking about. It's he comes from a different culture than where you all have been brought up. That gives him a different perspective, and the combination of you and him is going to give newer ideas, newer thoughts, newer processes, newer jobs. And that's my thought. For example, I'll give you an example from my own life. You might ask me, all this sounds good, but can you give an example of something like that? In my own career, in my last job, I was actually inspired by, I mean, all of you know Anna Manchagya, right? A great lyricist. Lyricist is a bad word to use for him, I guess, because it's used for all the movie guys these days. But he wrote a thing, one song, Enta matramu evvaru telachina anta matrame neevu. I think most of you might be doing that. The inspiration for one of the products, which is actually making a lot of dollars for my company, came from that song. Annamacharya never thought, hundreds of years later, one guy will get inspired by the song. He never wrote for that purposes, but I did, right? So my whole thought process is that maybe some of the jobs as we see today will be gone, but there will be a lot of newer jobs. For that, I think we should stop thinking like, I mean, as I said, our generation was probably the worst generation. We could produce companies like Infosys, but we didn't produce companies because we think similarly, if there's Uber here, I will have Ola there, right? That should not be our thinking. Our thinking should be based on our own intellectual background that thousands of years and generations that we have. How can we think about the current problems and come up with unique solutions, products and services? That's what will give us the edge.
I think we're on a time crunch here, so I'd like to have both of you.
I'll do a short one here. I think, for me, if you want to envision the future, start with the history, right? So I think about the changes that has happened in the last 20 years, mobile, cloud, data, security. Every one of those gave different moments of reflection on how the world is going to change, what kind of new skills are required, what kind of new jobs are going to emerge, etc. To me, I think AI is no exception. Of course, we're talking about there's a lot of opportunity here. Two sides to the coin. I think what we're talking about is when we say 50% of each of our jobs can be done by AI, it's imperative that we all learn how to leverage AI, right? So part of that is I use GPT as a thought partner a lot of times. I use it to write my speech but a lot of times it's not the final thing that I do, right? I use it to iterate until I like it and I edit it. So you're still on top of it. But what used to take me 3 hours to write my all-hand speech, it's taking me 5 minutes. I can do better, so I can become more productive, right? So that's the key thing. I think if you don't know, if you don't figure out your dragon analogy, if you don't figure that out, then you will be outdated. Now, certainly some jobs will definitely be automated, but that's been industrial revolution. It's not new for humans, but you have to adapt and find the new skills for those new jobs.
Yeah, I completely agree. That it's when computers came about, people said the same thing. Oh, they're going to eliminate all the jobs. And no, you just had to learn computers, right? So you have to learn how to deal with this dragon. But one skill thing though, especially for India, and we grew up, I call ourselves as answering machines. Okay, you ask a question. If I'm an expert on stuff, I'm an answering machine. Actually, with AI, that it is who can ask the right question is more powerful than who can answer it, because AI will answer a bunch of questions for you. But asking the right question, that is not our training. And I still like to just go back and it's like somebody asks a question like right now I'm answering. But it's the question, teaching our kids how to question and how to that's a whole different skill altogether. That's what MITs need to teach, I think. than creating more answering machines. That's how they do it.
So here's a smart question. Superlogo, what's next? With that,
Thank you.
I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Close to our guests. Please be on stage, sir. Srikanth, sir. Raja Kodri again. Sure. Thank you so much to all of you.